Welcome to the Center for U.S. War Veterans Oral Histories at the National Guard Militia Museum of New Jersey in Seagirt, a partner of the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. Today is March 27, 2019. I am Carol Fowler, Director of the Center. My honored veteran is retired First Sergeant Christine E. Goetz, who served in Operation Desert Storm with the United States Army. She served from September of 1985 until December of 2011. Thank you for wanting to be here today, Christine. Your eyewitness account is considered a primary historical source and a valuable contribution to the Veterans History Project. And good afternoon and welcome.
Hi, good to be here.
Christine, tell me how you heard about this project.
I've been trying to follow this for a long time, and we had, my husband passed away recently, and I did a project like this together because he wouldn't do it by himself.
Oh.
And the National Archives, I was interested in getting these things into that, and then the lady, Ellie Strobo at the library, put me onto the Seagirt project.
Oh, nice. Middletown Library.
Right.
Okay, good. I should also say that you are considered a Cold War veteran as well.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so take me back to life prior to service. Had anyone in your family served before you?
Oh yes, my father was in the Navy in World War II, but he was an overland sailor. He had a bad heart and lied to get into the service. When they found that out, they used him for interpretation. He had spoken German, and he was stateside, but they let him do his duty, and then he was separated. And my brother-in-law was in the Air Force. He served in Alaska. When his father died, he had to get out on a hardship to take over the business that they had. Mm-hmm. And my sister, the middle sister of my family, is in the Coast Guard, and she's married to a Coast Guardie, or Coastie, or whatever they call them.
Right, Coastie.
My uncle Jimmy, my mother's brother, was in World War II, and he had got a Bronze Star. He died on Guadalcanal.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And I don't know too much about that. I tried to get records, but that really was one of the instances where the records were lost in that so-called fire. And I was able to get a piece of his VA stuff when his sister tried to get help to bury him.
Oh, good.
And he did, come back home. He was buried in Pennsylvania. So, let's see, who else would have been in there? Because pretty much.
You went in 3 months before the cutoff, so let's talk a little bit about what was happening in your life then.
I was working with horses, race horses. I was an exercise rider and good at it, and I loved what I was doing, and I was all over the country. If I didn't like where I was, I went somewhere else. But I had promised my father I would do at least 2 years, because he was one of those that believed everybody should do at least 2 years in the service. Kept pushing it aside, and a couple of times I would go in Richmond. When I was working in Virginia, I went to Richmond to their MEPS, and my shoulder hadn't healed good enough. So they said, we could take you into basic, but you're not going to finish it at that time. So that was good. It got me out of that then. But then it was 6 months before I was 34. That was the cutoff. So it was either then or never, and I made a promise. So.
Was your dad still alive at the time?
No, he died in '67.
Oh, okay. So you enlisted in the Army. Why the Army?
Because of their PT program. Even over the Marines, I believe the Army has the better PT program, and you can pretty much do what you want through that. I ran marathon for our units and stuff like that. So, I got all the backing I needed to go anywhere on the weekends when I wasn't on duty, to go to different foot races and stuff. And that was primarily why, because I know my dad would have rolled over in his grave if he knew I wasn't in the Navy. Mm-hmm. But
where did the Army first send you?
Well, I enlisted out of Newark. MEPS was at Newark at the time. I think it's Fort Dix now, at the joint base. And then where did I get sent to? Fort Dix.
Mm-hmm. What kind of adjustment was it for you?
Oh. It was awful, because I was already 34, and the people I was going through basic with were all babies. They were kids. There was only 2 other females in our unit that were anywhere near 34. And it was funny because they made me a squad leader and I didn't want to do it. And I told them and they said, well, the idea of the military is to build leaders. And I said, well, I don't want to do it. I'm here because I'm fulfilling a promise. I didn't think I was going to like it. And I said, I'm going to have enough trouble getting myself through this. And it turned out that I loved every minute of it. And I liked the restrictions and I liked the discipline. And I was able, I couldn't do push-up number 1. Well, by the time they finished beating me up, I could do 35 push-ups, good ones, in the 2 minutes, which for a woman, that's pretty decent. And then I was able, they used me to help other people that weren't physically fit. Because running, I could always run for miles with no problem. And sit-ups, I never had any problems, so it was always the push-up. But they used me for that. But I did got picked on a few times because I probably should have kept that squad leader thing. It wasn't a big deal.
What do you mean?
Well, I didn't want to be the squad leader. And the commander, and that was Drill Sergeant Owensby, and that was his army, which, believe it or not, after a while I found out when you meet these drill sergeants and stuff, it's always their army. It always becomes yours. Even when I went progressed, it was always my army when I was disciplining somebody, a younger soldier, a subordinate. You know, you're not going to mess up my army. Mm-hmm. And well, of course, when you're in basic, you don't know that.
What was happening in the world at the time?
Let's see. They just gotten finished with the Afghanistan-Russia conflict. And I wasn't too much up on any of that stuff. I had a little bit of trouble remembering who was the president, of course I knew, but when it came down, we had to know the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, and all this, so I could never remember who they were. I remember Cheney. That name, I think he was this...
Well, that was later on.
Yeah.
All right, so, let's see. Did you face discrimination?
No, actually, not at all. I was one of the first females to be in transportation, and that was tractor trailers. And when I got to 533rd in Fort Benning, I was the only female that could actually change those 250-pound tires.
So is Fort Benning, Georgia, where you went after Fort Dix?
The first permanent party. But AIT I did at Fort Dix also. So I went from one barracks across the field to another barracks.
So how did you do?
What?
How did you like your job and how did you do in it?
Well, I already had driven tractor trailer. I moved racehorses for a while just for something else to do and extra money. So I had been trained on how to do that. And I wanted to go to the veterinary corps. Of course, that was for officers. I mean, let's face it, I was 34 now. Yeah, so they offered cook, transportation, and admin, and I wanted something where you were at least doing something physical. So I took transportation. They said it was one of the first times that women would be in that aspect of the Army, and I liked it. And Fort Benning was great. Most of the time in the summer, they sent you home by 12 o'clock because the Bots ball was over the amount of, the temperature that you can work in.
Oh.
But there I went to airborne school, which was, that I did get discrimination with, but it wasn't from being a female. Our unit had sent several people over there. That was the 533rd, and we were the 67th Battalion. And they didn't want somebody going over that was going to flunk out. So what they did was three days in a row I had to take the PT test. That's illegal. In military terms, that was illegal. They were trying to make it so I didn't pass. So, because airborne school was right across the field from where 533rd was, and I could walk there. I could still do my duties at 533rd and participate in the training. Anyway, they couldn't do it. I maxed the PT test all 3 days. So they said that out of, and I can't think of what his name was now, but
Just you?
Just me. I was the only female that was going through there at that time. I was the only person that came up from our unit to go there. Oh,
Edison? Edison, New Jersey?
No, I was at Fort Benning.
Oh, okay.
I was already there. They, you had that was in my contract to go there, and I do remember telling the commander, because let's face it, I was 34, and with 34 comes a lot of other experience in life. He told me that he didn't want to send me because he said I'll probably get kicked back. And I told him, I said, it's in my contract, and if you don't send me, I'm walking out the front gate. And I said, you can have MPs pick me up, but that's in my contract to go to that school. Anyway, I excelled in it, and I was with a lot of officers at that time. Anybody that went to West Point and stuff, they had just made it a rule that all the officers in those academies had to go through airborne school. So I was with a lot of people that were way over my head, but we all got along really good as far as military, you know, anything to do with military. And when we went to get our pictures taken for graduation, they stuck the three of us that were from the Fort Benning, which was, I was with the transportation unit, and there were two other people. They stuck us at the end of the thing because they had to get all the, what were we called, tenant units. They put us at the back end. But other than that, I really didn't have any trouble. And then I jumped with everybody that went from our unit after, which the colonel put me in charge of getting those people up to snuff with PT, because that's where they were getting kicked out of. They were getting sent back to their original units because they couldn't pass the PT tests and keep up with the training. And that is really a very physical school. So I never found anything else. I was our color bearer, so when we did our 5-mile runs on the Fridays, I ran around the entire battalion with carrying the flag and our streamers. And that's up Heartbreak Hill and Cardiac Arrest Hill, if anybody knows Fort Benning. That's one of the best places to train for a marathon. And I did enter the marathon twice at Fort Benning. Finished first in my age group, and there was only like 8 females in that at the time. But I thought that was pretty good.
Mm-hmm. So after Fort Benning, you came back up to Jersey?
Yeah, after Fort Benning, I got out of active duty then, and I went into the reserves. Actually, I didn't think I had to. I didn't read my contract very well. I was back to galloping racehorses, and in Longbridge, I was staying in a motel, and get a knock at the door one night, and who's standing there but two Army guys. And they said that I had to find a unit now. Of course, I threw my boots up on the wires of the telephone, the telephone wires, like everybody does when they think they're retired. I wasn't retired. So anyway, I ended up with 78th Division.
And that was in
That's Edison.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And what'd you do there?
Everything under the sun. First, 1155th, that's a part of the 78th Division. That's a school. I worked there, admin pretty much, because I was pretty young, didn't have too much going for me at that time. Then I went over to 78th Division S&S Company. That's when they stuck me with the trucks. And basically all we did was maintenance. And we exercised the Jeeps on our drill weekends and stuff, so it wasn't very much. We got activated for the Gulf War for 920th, which is part of the 78th Division also. And they were out of Bayonne, so a lot of us trailer drivers got activated with them. And then we went over to Saudi Arabia.
Did you have to go to Bayonne first?
Yeah, not to stay. Pretty much, they had and it was, the one thing I remember from that, which I thought was pretty sad, was they lined us all up that were going, and they had all the rest of the units going down the street that's by the old 78th building. And some of the guys thought they were really funny, and they were making comments about gas, and stuff like that, because our war was all about chemicals. They didn't know how the chemicals were going to act in the desert, which, come to find out, most of what they threw there dissipated before it actually became a problem. Anyway, that's what they were telling you. I beg to differ, because many times I went down to check the radiacs and stuff down at the end of the meters and stuff, and they were showing something, and there was the plutonium stuff with the scuds and whatnot. But I think that was the only thing there, and they shut them up real fast. They pulled them out of the formation, anybody that made comments, because let's face it, we were terrified of that gas stuff. We had all the training in that and what it can do to you, and then there was the issue with the pills if you thought you were in anything, and a lot of soldiers when we were over there were taking those things, and you're supposed to actually get ordered to take them. In other words, the higher ups would know you were in that kind of a background or the air or whatever. We have people that use the atropine, slept on those things, and one case I know of, the thing pierced his head, and you know that most of that was just accidental things. And
So how'd you get over to Saudi Arabia?
flew. They flew us from McGuire Air Force Base, and we stopped in Italy. Didn't see much of that. We got to get off the plane and got on another plane, and that was it, and it was at night, so we were in Italy, but for all intents and purposes.
Right.
And then we flew over there, and this was the best part of it all. The colonel that sent us, that was in charge of sending our unit, 920th, over to Saudi, sent us 2 weeks too early. They had no place to put us.
Oh, no.
No, he thought that he was doing a good thing by pushing everybody forward. You know, maybe there's a promotion in the works. It turned out horrible. We spent one night on the tarmac. They had no place to go with us. Then they brought in a whole bunch of school buses with all the Iraqi or Saudi signs on it and the colorful, you know, these colors. And Saudis driving us, and we had no clue where we were going. They drove us all over Riyadh and all over Hafabad, and we were all over the country, it seemed like. They had nothing to, they didn't know what to do with us. So then we ended up in the towers. I can't think of the name right now. But it was where the barracks got blown up several years later.
Wow.
Yeah, we were in those towers, and they were built for the Bedouins. Well, the Bedouins, much like American Indians, don't want to come out of their environment. So those were, and they ended up for just regular people and stuff, but we were put up in there. And scuds, every time you turned around, we'd be up, I don't know, floors that the plumbing didn't work. You had to pee in a bucket and send it down so they could pour it into the sewer down there. I mean, as far as cleanliness and stuff goes, that is not the part of the world anybody wants to be in. I don't know now because I didn't get the opportunity to go to Iraq and Afghanistan. But when you went to use the bathroom, like if you were getting refueled and stuff, you straddled a hole in the ground. There was no seats, but they did have a bidet in that when we first got there. It was in that hotel, that motel, or whatever that building was, the towers. And I didn't know what the heck that was, but they didn't work because the water wasn't hooked up. So, and then they would herd us in whenever there was a scud going over, and they'd herd us in where the elevators were, and we all had to sit there and put mop level 4 on. And a lot of people would start writing their wills on toilet paper, which is what I did, because I thought, this is it, I'm not coming out of this thing. And I had long hair at the time, which I couldn't get a good seal in my mask, and there were 3 other females in my unit. And then the day after the first time we were sitting there waiting for the scuds to blow up, we went to, there was a barber from the 920th. We went to him and he cut our hair off, and my hair's been short ever since. I always had it really long and braids or ponies, you know, ponytails, and not anymore. I wanted to seal on that thing. And that was the biggest fear, was the chemical, what could happen with the chemicals.
Right.
I mean, much like with Afghanistan and Iraq, they were looking for those IEDs. We were waiting to be poisoned.
Right.
I guess every war has its own little particular nuances.
So what was a typical day like there for you, and how long were you there?
Well, once we got out into the desert, it was nice. I thought it was nice because we were, about 15 to 20 miles off of the Iraqi border. So you had to do stand to, and of course we had the formations and training after training. Then we'd go out with the trucks and try to familiarize ourselves where we were, because it was all desert. And you know what, until they started putting all the antennas up on some kind of a ridge, they called it, you had no idea of where you were. The only thing you did know was when the sun came up in the east and went down in the west. But other than that, wherever it was, then they lost us. Our truck broke down, and the commander left me and my co-driver with the truck and trailer. And they took off. We sat there for about 6 hours before we were picked up. And, you know, it was like, it didn't, sometimes it was like one hand didn't know what the other hand was doing. And I can't say too much for the 920th leadership. We had some very, very good NCOs that had been in Vietnam and stuff, and those are the people you look to. You didn't look to the commander for anything. One of the biggest things that happened for me personally was the night before the ground war began, we had to go to King Khalid military city. So we got our water and a lot of provisions. And there's a horse place there. There's an equestrian center. So
Can you spell that?
King Khalid, K-A-H-L-I-D, I believe it is. And we went and to get water, and I was with Aggie, who was my best buddy, and he had been in Vietnam. So I kind of clung on to this guy. You know, he knew it. Well, he told me he knew the ropes, and I believed him 100%. So we were kind of like really good buddies. And he was driving. He was Panamanian, and we were going through the city there. And I told him, I said, let's stop at that stable. I said, if I'm going to die tomorrow, I want to smell horse shit one more time. Excuse me. So we did stop. And for 2 hours I was there. The people that were in charge of the equestrian center at that time were the French Foreign Legion. I speak a little bit of French from high school, but not enough to really have a conversation. I had no idea how to speak in Arabic. Now, from our time over there, they did learn, lessons learned, so they have a lot more interpreters for the next two wars that came up, Afghanistan and Iraq. Well, we're there, and they had a horse out there, and I'm talking, I know what the universal language is horse. I'm sure it is, because I'm talking to this French Foreign Legion guy, and somehow I ended up on the horse, which is in there. And so now I'm talking about how wonderful this is, and here comes this Iraqi guy with the smock, the whole 9 yards, and he's giving me the horse. Well, you know, anything down there, if they offer you something, you're supposed to take it. It's a gift. How am I going to take a horse back to where we came from? So in the interim, somehow it came to be that I couldn't take it with me, and there was no disgrace or anything. We got back to the unit, and it was like 4 hours later than we should have been back. It was pitch black dark. And our commander was waiting for us, and I jumped off out of the truck, and I said, "Smell this." And so he says, "What is that?" I says, "It's horse manure." and I said, "We found horses, and I told you I was going to find horses one way or the other here." And we weren't in the area where, you know, you would find Bedouins that were still mounted on what you anticipate is going to be, you know, in an Arabian horse. In fact, those Arabian horses don't even look like our American Arabians. They don't have the dish face. They don't have the tiny feet. Actually, the feet are big, like camels' feet, for handling the sand. You know, it was amazing. And they have a long face, and I think that has something to do with the wind. The same way people will have slanted eyes when they come from like Mongolia. Well, horses have to adapt to their environment too, and that's how I looked at that. But it was so good to. That was the highlight. And any time, like with the Women's Memorial, that was the highlight. They give you one chance to say something that really sticks out in your mind. That was it, because you know I was going to see that horses again before the end, and obviously I'm still sitting here, so it wasn't the end.
Right. All right, so what was your mission there?
We were transporting fuel to the 7th Corps.
Oh, okay.
We were right behind the 7th Corps. We followed them. So what was kind of funny with that was I seemed to always be one of the last people. And there's a picture in there of that. And what truck did I get? What tanker did I get? JA. That's jet fuel. You don't want to be driving jet fuel over things that aren't really roads.
Right.
That's it. God looks out for little children and idiots. And I wasn't a little child at that time. I always ended up with that. And I never could understand why people would say to me, "Why are you going for that?" Well, it's the last truck in line. So, you know, as it happened, I was usually the last person running for a truck. And that's what we did when the trucks came in. The people that were getting off mission got off mission, and everybody just ran and got into the truck, and we continued to keep doing the mission, because you're constantly refueling and then refueling the tanks.
Oh, okay. And Do you have any other stories that stand out for you from Saudi Arabia?
There was one that I didn't think was going to ever be an issue anywhere, and come to find out today it would have been an issue, and I should have reported it. We went to, now this was the Tissa, where it's not the King Khalid, it's the Tissa is where you go to pick up provisions. That's closer. It's a unit that's sitting there. You get bed and water purification is usually in that area, and you go from one thing to the next, and they load you up with cans of dehydrated stuff and the tea packs and that. So we were there, and we had a driver, we had a co-driver, and one guy in the back the back of the deuce and have to load the truck up. So we had to wait for a little while, so all three of us went in the back of the truck, and we were just kind of talking, and I literally got attacked by two of my soldier comrades. Well, you know what butt stroking is? They found out what it is, because in the interim, one of the sergeants ended up with a bloody mouth, and the other one I got in the stomach, and everything was fine. So we're sitting back there, and the first thing that crossed my mind is, oh God, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for this, because you don't think these guys were attacking me. It was a sexual attack. They were attacking me, and I'm worried about getting in trouble for it. So my friend Quentin, who I'm still in touch with, he lives in Washington State, and we'd been friends since the Gulf War, and I haven't seen him since, and maybe this summer I'm trying to make a plan to go out there to visit him. We've talked at least once every couple of months for a couple hours at a get-go. And I asked him to write a buddy statement for the VA for me. And he never knew what happened there. He said that all he knew was when he came over for us to get out and load our truck, he says, they opened the flap of the back of the truck, and there's these two guys bleeding all over the place, and I'm just sitting there like nothing happened, which is exactly how it was. I was just sitting at the end of the bench and just kind of contemplating how much trouble I was going to be in. Well, anyway, we loaded up the truck, and it was long after that incident that he found out what happened there. And
so no one said anything?
Well, when we got back with the stuff, of course, the commander's waiting there with his training NCO to help unload, and a smaller bunch of people that were going to unload the truck. And the sergeant gets off the truck that had the bloody mouth, and I think he had better idea of what was going to happen there than I did, because he said that he fell off the truck.
Wow.
So evidently, well, he had a lot more time in service than I had. I mean, that guy had been to Vietnam and everything else, so he was covering his own rear end more than he was covering mine. Well, that never was reported, what actually happened there, and it should have been, because number one, it would have helped me with my case with the VA, and it also would have helped what's going on now with people reporting stuff. But
do you mean PTSD?
Yeah, it would have helped with that, but it would have helped more with the sexual military sexual trauma. But I didn't have trauma from that. You see, I took care of that myself, and I didn't think that, and even now, I wouldn't go back now and say anything about that, because I really, it abhors me when I see these congresswomen coming out of the woodwork now, after that much time. That would be like me now saying, oh, I was sexually assaulted during the Gulf War. It doesn't sit right. If you're going to do it now. Do it when it happens.
People are finding their voice now, though.
Yeah, and I'm trying to understand both sides of it. And I know that some people weren't raised like I was. I've been fit all my life, and you know what? I still carry a razor blade with me all the time. I know how to defend myself. Some
Did you
women
have a
don't.
razor blade with you then? Mm-hmm. That's why they were bleeding?
No. I
Oh.
butt stroked him. I hit him, took the end of the rifle and whacked him with the butt of the rifle.
Oh, I didn't understand that.
With my hand, one hand, I can get this thing out in a matter of 5 seconds. So if anybody goes to attack me, I'm going to protect myself one way or the other. It used to be the hat pin, carry a hat pin with you. That was my mother's thing when I was a real young, always have a hat pin. Go for the eye.
Wow.
But I always carry a blade with me. Luckily, I haven't had to use it at all, and I don't think I ever will.
How many women were with you in Saudi Arabia?
Saudi Arabia, we had, I'd say there was about 8 to 10 of us.
And you guys never talked to each other about sexual assault?
Never did. You know what was going on? There was a lot of people meeting with men in the tractors when they weren't being used.
Oh.
And we had the first sergeant at the time, First Sergeant White. He's in South Carolina right now. He's retired. He came out in formation. He said, "I don't mind you guys getting a little on the side," he said, "but keep it away from the Brits." We shared a berm with the Brits. You know, you're not supposed to be doing that kind of stuff, and you're supposed to have a little bit of
Decorum.
Yeah, and pride in yourself. And it wasn't. It was appalling. In fact, at that time, when I wrote they asked us to write what went on during the time for the military, the DOD, and they were supposed to go over all these things. I did write about that. I said, number one, I thought it was disgusting that most of these women were married. Their husbands are at home, and they're messing around like that. And there was actually one sergeant in our group that was actually getting on trucks and continuously riding back and forth to the first stop where you grab a few hours sleep or a half hour sleep and then get back on a truck. And he was actually meeting somebody there. I don't know how they did that, but he was meeting somebody for a treat there. And, you know, I thought that the first sergeant shouldn't have been promoting stuff like that, and he did. He made it sound like it was okay to do that as long as nobody knew it.
How long was your deployment for?
6 months. And then I wanted to stay because they told you, they had to offer reservists something. They told you if you stayed, you could get back into active duty. And I was told before I made that happen, they said, don't do it. It was good advice because you'll go back to Fort Dix. They'll have you as a holdover for about a year. Your civilian job will be gone, and they still won't hold you over. They still won't let you re-enlist into the active duty because they were downsizing. After a war, they always downsize so much. So it's a good thing that, you know, I had that advice, and I went back. I was working for the park system on the civilian side of the house. I was a park ranger. So I went back to that and stayed with reserves and continued to that. And actually, when my time for retiring came up, I kind of tried to hide the paperwork and stuff. But, you know, computers today, it's all on computers, and they're going to catch you just like that, which they did. So the 21st of December, 2011, that was my birthday. That was my last day.
Before we get there, you also were in Red Bank?
Yeah, we were with, let's see, that was part of the 8th Battalion and 98th Division. And then with that same group, I ended up in Northfield down here in New Jersey.
Down here? I don't know where Northfield is.
Northfield's down by AC.
Oh.
So I was progressively going south.
Interesting. And we forgot to ask about your homecoming from your deployment. Was there any kind of homecoming?
Yeah, it was. They were making up for Vietnam.
Do you want to
We had
describe that?
people when we flew into Newark. There were people there, and there were people at McGuire. They made a really big deal. They made a big deal about us having the Desert Storm uniform before we got back too. They wanted everybody, and they did a good job with that, I think, because they did owe the Vietnam vets something, and through us, I think they helped them out a little bit anyway.
And Vietnam vets were still serving, right? You said
Yeah, there were a lot that were still serving, but there were so many that had been, you know, they only did, because they were drafted. Most of them were drafted.
True.
And they didn't want to be there in the first place,
Right.
and then they came back and they were spit on and ostracized and all kinds of stuff like that. And they're still healing.
Right.
You know, and now there's a Desert Storm Memorial finally being built. And they said, why build something for such a short war? Well, it really wasn't, because we were there for Desert Shield before that. It was a big buildup. It might have only been 100 hours thanks to Schwarzkopf and his planning and his guidance, I take my hat off to that man. Was incredible. And I mean, his dad was here.
State Police Commandant.
Yeah, and I wish I had a chance to actually meet him in person and just talk to him. I saw him at a distance when he was visiting the troops and stuff. He just towered over everybody, but had such a wonderful personality. And, you just have to be grateful that you actually had an opportunity to meet somebody and be under them. And our president at the time, we went over there for a mission. The mission was to liberate Kuwait. We accomplished that mission. He himself had said that the Middle East needs to be ruled by the type of people that are ruling them. He did allude to that. We weren't there to get rid of Saddam Hussein, and he had, in so many words, said that it would have been worse if we did get rid of him. Well, we'll see what happened after that.
Right.
And the same with Gaddafi. Those type of people keep things in line. And I really love that president, because we did what we were supposed to do and he brought us home. And I don't see that happening anymore. I don't see that. And when I was in college, I wrote my thesis on the law of war, and his sons, it was all illegal. No business invading Iraq.
So you used the GI Bill, you went to college?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it was about a month before my 10-year cutoff. I got an associate's through Fort Benning, and I wanted to do something more, and I wanted to use that, because at that time we only had 10 years and that was it. You weren't getting it. So I got a waiver so that I could continue to go to school as long as I got in under the 10-year thing. So I ended up getting a degree in paralegal and history and social science up to bachelor's. After that, I got accepted to Monmouth University. I was going to go for history, and I was working at the post office at the time. Time frame, it wouldn't have worked between trying to get from Middletown to the university and then actually being able to grasp. Brookdale Community College was wonderful for me, because I'd leave work and be there in 15 minutes. And it was all people of my own age. We all wanted to be there, so it was excellent.
Good.
And I'd still like to get my master's in history. I'd like to teach. But at 67, I found a little bit of, I always had a talent for writing, and I've kept a journal every day of my life, except for a couple of times when I was very, very content with life. Because there's nothing to write about when you're content. It's when you're not content that you write. And so I found my muse in my husband that passed, and his World War II legacy and what went through with the hospice and grieving stuff. So I'm doing some writing now.
Good for you.
But they have a World War II museum at Brookdale Community College, which isn't being done right. It's just a room now, and they've got a lot of artifacts that need cataloging. And they also, the intent of the freeholder that is not with a freeholder anymore, that had...
Ted Narazenik?
No, Curry. Curry is his name.
Curly?
Curly. You know why he's not there? Because he speaks like I was raised on speaking your mind, and not so much political stuff. In fact, I tried to back him up. I told him they could use me for anything they want, because he helps veterans a lot. What does he
have to do with the World War II Center?
He and the people at Brookdale started that, the World War II museum down there.
So do they need volunteers to work on cataloging?
No, I tried to do that. I said, I would like to volunteer my time. I can catalog. We can get another room. My plan right now is my house, when I pass away, is going to go to Brookdale for that specific reason.
Wow.
For better that museum. And I could do that. And the intent was to use those artifacts, those books, for students to use in their projects.
So where is it now? In the library of
It's
Brookdale?
right across Brookdale's, the Bankier Library, and for the most part, it's always closed. So I talked to somebody there, and we made a couple of plans, and they fell through. The guy always had something else he had to do, so it just kind of, I guess they aren't really that interested in it. But I was told, because I asked them if they wanted some of those World War II artifacts of heralds, and they said they've got a lot of stuff from Vietnam, because Vietnam vets are dying a lot now, and there's not that much left of World War II vets, but they're getting a lot of stuff. Sure, if it was cataloged, and if there was some kind of organization, they could use it. They couldn't get more things. Those things are going to be gone. You know what? If you go on the internet and try to buy a World War II helmet in decent shape today, they're very expensive. But other people, you know, when somebody dies, and if it's your grandfather, your great-grandfather, they open up the trunk and they say, who wants this junk? And a lot of it just goes by the wayside, and that belongs to the country. That really doesn't belong to any one person. That's my belief on that, and I just love history. And you know, how we see history is each individual's perceptions and what they lived through and what they, you know, what they experienced. So it's nice to get into a group of people that are scholars and know and then beat these things around. And you see, there for every question, there's like 50 different answers. But you can glean something out of all that. And it's really close to my heart. And I'm trying to get Harold so that he's never forgotten. And him and my dad went to boot camp in Sampson, New York. So before Harold passed, we went to a Tin Can Sailor reunion up in Niagara, which isn't far from Sampson. So we went all through this backgrounds and we got there. And he pointed out where the barracks had been. It's a state park now. And they have a museum there too. It's a New York museum. They won't take any donations. It's all funded through it's the states. Because I thought of maybe building a room onto that so that I could put Harold's stuff in there and have a Harold room, you know, or no, they said they'd take anything, but it would go down in the basement. And you know what happens with that, mold and everything else, that's the end of that. In a few years, gone. But Harold showed me where because it's on the Finger Lakes, and he would point across and he'd say, that's where we used to sneak out at night and swim across the lakes to go to the bars. I mean, those World War II guys were tough.
Wow.
That's why I fell in love with him, because they don't make men like that anymore. Not with those traits. Maybe I shouldn't stereotype that, you know, men, but for the most part, up until I was 43 when I met him, I had met a man worth devoting my time to. And he just had those traits. Like my dad had the same traits. And it was funny that they both went to the same place for boot camp.
So did you fall in love with the VFW?
That's kind of funny too, because at the VFW, I had gone to 2179. I was switching over from the Edison post that I belonged to, and I was kind of scared because I'm not one that goes into bars a whole lot. And this, let's face it, it's a bar. So I was sitting in there waiting to talk to the commander to find out how I transfer over. And there was this gentleman sitting there. And he was just started talking to me, and I found out through our conversation, I was telling him I was still in the military and stuff, and he was telling me how he was dating somebody. So I thought, this is a wonderful person. I have a friend here at least to begin with. So not thinking of anything else. Well, when I left the park system to go to the post office, I cracked up my truck. And I had to go to Hamilton, New Jersey to take the carrier college so that I knew how to put mail into little holes. Yeah, well, it's the training you get, and how to drive a postal truck. So I had no way to do that. So I was sitting there. We had a meeting this one night, and I was sitting at the bar. I went right from work, and I was just, how am I going to get there? What I wanted to do was go back to North Dakota through the post office, because they told me they'd transfer me after my 3-month probation. Well, that's a lie. It's a governmental lie. They're going to keep you right where you are. Anyway, Harold asked me what was wrong. And this was like a couple of months after I had met him. And I told him what was wrong. I said, I don't have anything to drive to get to this. And he goes, and I wasn't saying that, expecting anything. He says, I have an extra car you can borrow.
Oh my goodness.
And this is in New Jersey? Somebody's offering something? I'm like, oh, So it was a Cadillac, no less. An older Cadillac in excellent shape, and I just could not believe this. And then in the interim, while we were talking, come to find out, him and Marge weren't going together anymore. She evidently wanted to spend more time with her family. And so I had the car for 2 weeks, the 2 weeks training, and this day he goes to pick me up to pick up my truck. And I had spoken to him several times in between, and I thought, oh, I'm never going to see this man again. And we get to the auto body shop, and we're sitting there, and I wasn't in any hurry to get out of the thing because I'm prolonging this. I mean, I liked him right from the get-go. And he says to me, can I ask you a question? And where I'm kind of talky and forceful, Harold was just the sweetest thing. You know, I mean, he wouldn't swear if he had a mouthful, and I'm a truck driver, so you can do the math there. Anyway, he says, would you like to have dinner with me tonight? And here I want to be demure, and I'm, instead of saying I'll check my calendar or something, it came out, yes, you know, and so I brought the car back, and from there we just clicked. And then he had to get out of where he lived because his family wanted to sell the house. It was left between the three stepchildren and him, and I really wanted to get out of where I was living because I was just renting a room, so we bought a house together. And from there, everything just kind of fell into place. We lived together for 24 years, but didn't get married until 9 months before he passed.
Oh my gosh.
VA wouldn't let us be buried next to each other at Doyle Cemetery. You have to have a piece of paper, and I guess regulations and rules are for a purpose. If they let me do that, then everybody would be wanting that privilege, and it's really probably not the right thing to do. So he's buried there, and my thing is already there, except for the plaque that goes on top of it, and that's kind of eerie when you see that in itself. But what a beautiful place to be.
Good. Did you go to any reunions? Did your unit or...
The 920th had a reunion. I found out about 2 years later on the internet. I found out of it, and that's how I got in touch with First Sergeant Waite.
Oh.
I got actually, I answered the thing from the VFW magazine because it was behind there where it has the reunions coming up. And they didn't have another one because there wasn't any interest in it as much as the first one. And the first one, he sent me the book from it. They actually made a pamphlet book with photographs and stuff. So I got to see how some of the folks had changed. And last year, we were gonna get together and try to get some kind of a thing going to make a 920th memorial in Bayonne. And I really haven't heard from him or contacted him since then, because he really does believe that there should be something. Bayonne's not there anymore.
Oh.
The where we were isn't there. It's just gone. So there should be something that's a memorial
Right.
to because that was there for a long time. That unit. I mean, I was only there for the time for the Gulf War.
Right.
But I think there should be too. So he asked me if I had any ideas, and I have a lot of ideas for fundraisers and stuff like that. But he's in South Carolina, and the people that went to the first reunion are all over the place now. Most of them are still in New Jersey, but a good portion of them aren't anymore, and some of them aren't interested in that. Some of them were just in the military to get a paycheck between having a civilian job and not having any money at all, you know, reserve-wise. Mm-hmm. So it all depends on what your status is. There was one thing that happened in Saudi that I think it's worth mentioning. In fact, that's how it took me years to find out what started. We had a soldier that went over there, and he shouldn't have, because he had his teeth pulled and he kept bleeding. He couldn't stop the bleeding. Well, there was an extension to all that. The guy had leukemia, and they came over. I was helping out in the mess tent whenever we weren't on driving maneuvers, driving missions. For something to do, I would do anything. So I'd go over there and mess with the immersion heaters, and because I was certified in that, not everybody was, or help the cook and stuff. And they came over for a number 10 can, And the number 10 cans, everybody wanted one because what we used to do with those, we had them under our cots. And if you had to pee at night, instead of finding your way through the wires and to the latrines, you would use the number 10 can as a toilet, and then in the morning get rid of that. So everybody wanted one, and we had a list of who gets one next. Well, they came over and wanted one, and there was a mission out, and there was very few people left at the base. We were in Log Base Echo. And I said, well, I can't just give you one. I said, I have one, but there's a list. So they said, well, then you need to come over here and see what's going on here, because we need something to catch this blood. I'm like, blood? Sure enough, it was like he was draining out of his mouth from that day. Well, now we're trying to get a hold of somebody to get a medevac in there. And that's another thing. I think they learned a lot of lessons from the medevac stuff from the Gulf War too. Even though there wasn't that much, we had a lot of friendly fire that, well, not us, but most of the deaths were from friendly fire.
Wow.
So finally they got, and we were all mad. We were all angry because he shouldn't have been there. He had leukemia. So needless to say, with the leukemia and the blood being all mixed up and the wound in his mouth from those teeth being pulled, he had no business being there. That was another mistake from that commander that sent us, because he shouldn't have been there, and we had a fella in the unit that was deaf in one ear. Yeah, that's a no-no too, and he was there. So there was a couple of big issues, and he just wanted to make quota to make sure we just got over there as fast as possible and before the time we were supposed to be there. Well, this kid gets evacuated out of there, and we want to know what happened, because that's one of our brothers, and nobody's telling us nothing, and the commander doesn't want to know from anything, because he had the right, he had the authority to say, no, these two people can't go. The guy with the hearing, they got rid of him as soon as the 100 hours was over with. He was gone right after that, so that body could go. But this young kid, and I couldn't think of his name, he was a black fella, and he was just a sweetheart. He had a really wry sense of humor and very rarely talked, but when he said something, it was usually pretty funny, and I didn't know his name. And for years it bothered me. Well, going to 9/11, that all came out. And then I started wanting to find out who this was, because I wanted to pay respects to his grave. Harold knew what I was doing. He was there for a lot of this. I'd go over to the library, went through every single obituary from the Star Ledger and Asbury Park Press, because I was sure, I wasn't positive, but in my mind was sure that he was from New Jersey. He wasn't part of the Pennsylvania troops that were added to us. I went through all those. I couldn't find anything, nothing for years. I went to Pallone's office, because at that time, I had First Sergeant White's address. He was still in that area, the Bayonne area. Nobody answered me. Our commander lives right in Keansburg. Keansburg's the next town over. Actually, North Middletown, where I am, which is Middletown now, is not even a mile to where this man lives. I couldn't get them to answer me, because the commander, who is now a full bird colonel, if you can believe that.
What's his name?
Do I really have to?
No, you don't have to.
He's, as far as I know, he was in when I retired. He was still there. He was one of the colonels at 78th, which is now down in Fort Dix again. Anyway, nobody would answer this. They wouldn't tell me, because that went into the circular file.
Oh.
And it was about a month before I retired. We're standing in formation, and like I said, things happen for a reason. There are no coincidences. I'm standing there, and one of the guys who I'd been in unit with for 2 years now is standing in front of me, and I said something about the 920th and the Gulf War, and he turns around and he says, Sergeant Goetz, you were in the 920th? I was supposed to go over there. I was in the 920th, but he got out for a reason. He didn't have to go overseas. And I'm like, can you tell me? And I explained, and the guy's name was Haynes. For years, and Pallone, and all these other things I had been going through trying to find this guy's name. Well, come to find out, his wife had married one of the guys who used to be a stripper from the 920th, that's what he did in the civilian world. So she remarried right away. So I thought, well, I guess it's...
Did you know that the one who got medevaced died at the time?
Oh, yeah, we knew. That's why we were all upset about it, because he died within 2 days of getting to Walter Reed.
So you heard at the time?
Yeah, and the thing is...
and that's when you found out it was leukemia?
Yeah. And also...
Your commander told you?
Oh, no. That came through the wires. You know how we have the NCO network? Well, that came through the wires. And the thing is, they took all our ammunition from every single person there. For about 3 weeks, nobody had a bullet, not bullet number one. And they were afraid that what happened in Vietnam with some of the officers were really bad and the soldiers took care of them. They were afraid something like that might happen. Now, that was not on anybody's mind. But I guess they just wanted to cover all alleys and stuff like that. But then we finally got to have a memorial service for him, which was a closure for the whole unit. And not 100% closure.
And he was from Jersey, like you thought?
Yeah. Yeah, he was right up from that area. Mm-hmm. But I never did get to the grave because since she remarried so soon after he passed, I don't know what that was all about. Maybe maybe there was hanky-panky. We didn't know much about his background, but he did have 2 children. And the children were the 2 I would have liked to have seen and told them how good their father was. I really would have loved, and I'd still like to do that. Mm-hmm. But they would be, maybe in their 30s already now? I'd still like to do that because he was one of those people that were there, but like myself, we didn't do anything spectacular. But everybody wants to be remembered for something, and that's why I think this project is so very important.
Thank you.
And I just like to I mentioned his name, so he will go down in history too, a little bit, but that was supposed to happen, and that was just about a month or 2 before I had retired, before my retirement date.
Right.
So I was supposed to know then. But from that and everything from 9/11, I always thought I was all right. Well,
is that when you first went to the VA?
Yeah. I had taken all the research stuff when we first came back because that's supposed to make it better. Lessons learned and make it better for the troops downrange the next war and stuff. So I went for all that stuff just because it was interesting and for no other reason. But after 9/11, just something, I did a 360 and my whole personality was changing anyway. My supervisor from the post office kept telling me, he was a Vietnam vet, and he kept telling me I needed to get help. There were symptoms there that I didn't realize were there. The outspokenness, the jumping at everything, the fear of everything, and the suspiciousness of people. And, I was always pushing myself away from everybody. It wasn't like, I really didn't want to have a lot of friends.
So you got help and you're better?
Well, I see 2 wonderful, wonderful people that were there because when Harold died, all that trauma started again. And then there was a thing where I got run over on my bicycle, the bicycle Harold gave me. And while I was grieving, that became my source of anytime I'd feel upset, I'd get on the bike and I'd ride for miles. I rode to Doyle Cemetery. It's 44 miles from home several times last summer. And it's like I'm free. I mean, motorcyclists, I know that, that's not a cage. They call cars cages. Well, a bicycle's a little lesser than a motorcycle because it's all pedal power, but I got run over and I ended up with a torn rotor cuff and a lot of black and blue and a lot of torn muscles, but the bike folded up around me. And I believe that was a little mystical too, because I was caught under the bumper. He went through a stop sign, this guy, and he dragged me along. Oh, no. So, that there was 3 traumas on one trauma again last year, the grief and the Gulf War, and it was like at one point there, I didn't know if I was going to, after losing Harold, because he was my standard when it came to any nightmares, and when the stuff just came out full blown. It could have been pretty messy, but the VA
nightmares from the assault.
No, that was from the Gulf War. We tidied up when the guard unit from Pennsylvania got hit. We were working on our trucks over there when that got hit, so we helped clean up that area, and that was the first thing. Then when we went across the berm, we had to stop, and the commander had to get whatever he was doing up there. We were pulled over, and we had to go up to where the tanks were blown up and stuff, and there was pieces of people all.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And it was. I remember something that was really weird, and it's still weird when I think about it. One of the guys said, "Look, there's a guy's penis laying there," and it was not attached to anybody, but it was.
Oh,
And that's
I'm so
exactly
sorry.
what it was. And aside from that, there were other things, and it was like. It's still surreal when I think about. Actually, a picture of that's in that book. You can't really see it. It's the tank, but it is the tank where that happened.
Wow.
And then we had the issue with the camels. You can't destroy any of their property, and being raised with animals, when
Right.
something is suffering, you put it down.
Right.
Well, a convoy before ours hit a bunch of camels, and they were like thrown on the side of the road, so we stopped, and I wanted to shoot them. And you couldn't do that. But they were laying there, and one of them, obviously its back was broken, and it was swinging its head around, and I said, "You just can't leave these things like this." And they don't take care of their sores on their animals. At Haffabatten, they had a camel sitting by the side of the road, and it had a wound in it that was about 2 inches deep, and it was filled with maggots and green stuff. So I had my mess kit, took the stuff out with a spoon and just scooped it out with that, and put a little mud in there. Mud's better than that other, but do you know I could have been stoned for that? Could have. Over there, I could have. And then on top of being a female, which was another funny little anecdote, women aren't supposed to go with the men for prayers. I have 3 Qurans, 2 of which are in Arabic, because I looked like a man in my uniform. You could not tell one iota that I was anything of a female, so I sneaked into a couple of the classes.
Oh.
That could have ended up really bad, too, if anybody ever knew about that one. You live and you learn. But I still have those Qurans,
Right.
and they're protected very nicely, because that's something else I need to give away too. That's going to be permanent, because when my time comes, all that stuff is going to be, everything that's in that house, has to go where it needs to go now.
Christine, before we look at your items you brought, I just want to say I'm honored and humbled that you're here today to speak to me of your sacrifice and contribution that you made in service to our country. And thank you, and God bless you. Welcome home.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, the whole thing has been around the military, and to this day, I just miss that so much, because not having had much of a family, and when I was in the military, that was family. No matter where I went, that was family. I don't find that with the VFW like it should be.
Right.
But then I had the family with the post office, and when I retired from there to take care of Harold, that was family, and then Harold died, and there is nobody. I have a sister, but the military was always there, and I don't know, I do believe everybody should do at least 2 years. And gain some insight into what actually goes on, and loving the person next to you, because if you get to go to war, and that's a privilege, if you get to go to war, that person next to you is a brother or a sister. I mean, they got your back and you got theirs, and other than Harold, that was the only time I ever really felt that much love and consideration and gratitude.
Well said. All right, we'll be right back.
This was upon the first enlistment when I went to Fort Dix for the first time.
You're 34?
Mm-hmm. And this here was for going overseas for the Gulf
Wow.
War.
Almost looks like a mugshot, doesn't it?
Yeah, I wasn't very happy because I was working with horses then, and the park system. So I had two good jobs going for me, and I really didn't want to be away from the horses. So it was kind of like at first didn't really want to do that. Graduation picture. And this is, I always liked, oh, I didn't realize that was St. Michael's. I was just given interested in St. Michael, and this came from Airborne. The commander at the time gave us all this to keep in your wallet, and it was too nice to keep in the wallet for what it says, and it's a little prayer on the back.
Oh, nice. So then you have your retirement photo.
This one's the retirement photo.
Oh.
It's kind of. Second phase.
Where is this?
And this is at Indian Town Gap.
Oh, we didn't say that. I'm sorry, I forgot.
Oh, that was a reserves, one of the reserves goals.
Oh, okay. Where are you?
Right there.
Oh, okay.
This is IG school. I was an inspector general assistant, and we had a big class, and I'm right there. That was an interesting job. You got to, I was in charge more of the weight control and physical training, anything to do with the with the body. Thank God it wasn't with some of those things that they were going over.
Where was that?
That was at 78th Division, when it was in Edison.
Right.
School in South Carolina. That was through National Guard unit. They have a big building down there now.
That's you?
Yeah. It's outside of Fort Jackson. What a beautiful building. Everything is right in this building. The barracks are in there. Where you do PT is in there, except for, of course, the trail outside, the track. Very happy camper, is it? That was when I was first sergeant for Fort Leonard Wood. Basic training unit. That was Fort Leonard Wood the next year.
Oh, okay. Much better.
Yeah, they have a wonderful way of doing that for reserve people that are coming in and taking care of that. They do your picture with the class. So actually you do have some remembrance there too. That was really great duty, and I'll tell you what, it was funny because we had we called them the Q-tip squad. You know, this was right at the time when they were doing that thing with trainee abuse. And here I'm first sergeant, and these guys all got a sunburn on their head. Well, the thing is, they took them on a weekend to the hospital, and the hospital made a big deal out of it. We called them Q-tip squad because they put these towels all around their heads. It was pink. But the people that were in charge at that time were, I think there was a staff sergeant or something. They really didn't know what to do. So, of course, there you go, before the sergeant major, and how did this happen? Well, it wasn't as bad as it looked like. Of course, that night it was like, maybe I ought to run away from home or something, but it wasn't that bad. Sergeant Major's Academy. Oh, that was another one. That was the last school I went to as a sergeant. Yeah, white hair. Sergeant Major's Academy in Fort Bliss, Texas. Go to conferences and stuff like that, and when you have a house and stuff, and you just can't do that.
Oh, I
had
see.
a job.
Yeah.
JROTC thing.
Yeah, I recognize that. So was that your unit also?
No,
No.
that was here, and we were just the
the
evaluators for the competition here.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that's ANOC from Seagirt. We all like to come to Seagirt. I always like the food here.
Really?
Yeah. I said, they had one little question, and I enjoy the military training in the sense of belonging.
Nice.
I didn't have too much to say. Copy, the airborne certificate is the same thing, but it's about this big on a piece of hard, like a cardboard. When I was running the marathons for the military, that was in the bayonet from Fort Benning. What a horrible, horrible picture.
I don't think so. Why do you say that?
At least I was smiling. Most people, when they're running, look like they've got gas. And if you look at the date, that was one of the first all-female basic training units, too.
Okay, where are you?
Let me find me. Right there. I always look like the head's been cut off on top, flat head. Right, and now today you can hardly see the faces at all because of the way newspaper print disappears. Military City Equestrian Club or whatever it was. But that certainly does not look like the Arabians the American Arabians with the dish face and the petite feet and all this other stuff. But they do have one less vertebrae, any Arabian. Yeah, they gave us license plates after we came back with Desert Storm, but you were only allowed to use them for 6 months on the front of your car. It didn't have your license number on it. It was just the palm trees, and I still have that too. And just in the barracks, we spent more time just training, going over the same stuff we always went over,
Is Mr. Haynes in here?
No. Over there, I can't find him. I've looked for him too, and I just can't find him. He's probably back in Panama.
Is that you?
No, that's Dawn. I can't think of her last name. That's me. With Kilroy. No, he looks like Kilroy, doesn't he? We were coming back from the NCO club, and it just where his head was. I took the picture of Eddie, and I can't think of his name. His last name was Fuchs, but it looked like it was pronounced some other way, the way it's written. Anyway, I just took that, and then I noticed that he was blinking out the A. Oh, there should have been an O or an N there.
These are nice pictures.
And then, of course, some of them, you always have the beer in there. In the barracks, where if anybody came through, you would have been in hot water for it. But here we are on the tarmac, waiting, and no place for us to go.
All right.
And that's the tarmac, and this is one of the buses that they stuck us on. All over creation, we were on that bus that second night, and we had no idea where we were going, and the guy that was in there couldn't speak English, so I just figured that was the end of us all. That's the little room, and these are the towers we were living in. And from this one, I think it's a different one, you can actually see the Gulf in the background. I don't think it's that picture, though. But see how we had to wash our clothes in buckets and then hang them out along the little terraces there. That was my room. my room. My space, I should say. Me and Aggie in my space, and Dawn, I think, was the female that was next to me. There's us getting the haircuts. Of course, I took the picture, so I'm not in that. And if you notice, the hair's brown. I never dyed my hair. Where do you see toward the end? It was turning gray. It was turning white, actually. It wasn't gray. This is the one. If you look real good, there's the Gulf.
Yeah.
And we're always going up on the roof, which was off limits, but you could see everything from up on the roof. So of course you went up there. And these were the guys that were guarding the entrance to this area where all the troops were until they got sent out to the desert. This is where where we were working on our trucks down there in the the area back there, the port, and that's one of the trucks. And that's me changing a tire. See, those tires, most women can't lift them, let alone get them up there. But you know how I get them up on the hub? This way, from the back. And of course, this is where, you always had that gas mask. This First Sergeant White. And just a little green, because it surprised me that they had such nice plantings in there, in that place. Oh, some of the people in the unit across from us snuck over to Bahrain and came back with booze. And in Saudi Arabia, booze is illegal. I'm telling you, soldiers and sailors, they will find a way. And he was from the other unit, the Tennessee unit, and the guy fell asleep, and unfortunately nobody ever got to see that picture. I thought it would be cute. And there we are on the buses again. The day before the war started, these are the Puerto Ricans that were in our unit. We were 90%, well, I'd say we were 60% black, 20% Puerto Rican, and a few Caucasians. They were dancing. We had a boombox there, and we were all we're going to get this over with. So party time, just sleeping on the bus. This was heading out to the, it's the 7th Corps things. And these were all going alongside of us. The Vietnam vets would really remember those things. And this is living in a tent. And see, when we had your cot, and then we had wood floor that we were walking on, plywood, and then you'd keep the number 10 can under your cot, which could get really, really messy. And if you look at this picture here, this is I was helping in the mess tent. Look at the time. That was the morning. We were preparing breakfast. Me and the sergeant that was in charge of the mess. I was learning how to make shit on a shingle, which is real hard, You put the hamburger in the pot. You had a Lister bag, and you were lucky if you got a quart of water out of it by the time we got to using them. There you go. Nothing. Absolutely nothing, no matter where you looked. And here's washing clothes. We all had our little dishpan type thing and washed the clothes in there. I just like that picture because it's the sun coming up. And see, there's the equestrian club sign from where you saw the horse before. And there's the horse. And this is the French Foreign Legion guy. Aggie was taking those pictures. I wish he had taken more of them. But don't we always wish there was more pictures? See? J.A. Nobody wanted to drive that, and then I find out after the fact. God looks out for little children, idiots. That's trying to sleep in the front of the cab. There's not enough room because you have that fake seat in between and where the two gear shifters are, the crankcase shift and the transmission shift. There's not very much room. This is the fella, not him. His brother or his cousin was the one that told me who Haynes was. These are the things that were, it's amazing how that just happened, and look at how they rust from whatever the chemicals are that's blowing these things up.
Right.
Oh, we were right behind the 7th Corps as they were taking care of their business. I like this picture. Took it through the window. And almost, this one came out pretty good too. Almost, see the 7th Corps sign is that A-looking thing. Almost perfect in the frame. That's the one that I was speaking of before. See, now something like that would have been confiscated. And since I had no idea what was going to come out of any of these pictures, I just wasn't putting them anywhere. So when they set the oil things on fire. This is the highway of death.
Oh, gosh.
And this is, it was incredible there. We were kind of lost, and we were on the side of the road, and one of the lieutenants gets out of the truck and goes walking across the field, because there's all kinds of debris and everything laying around there. And all you can hear is the MP saying, "Stop where you are, you're in a minefield." They had to go out and get him. A lot of stuff got thrown in the circular file from that. And these guys were all Iraqis that gave up, surrendered, and we got to haul them to where they were going, to where they were being held. But they didn't want to be there anyway. They were subscribed, or whatever it was called, conscribed. Just they took them out of their homes. Oh. And made soldiers out of them. They didn't want to be soldiers, and we were giving them MREs. They were, they just wanted to live. That's all. They just wanted to be
back
citizens.
To their families.
Yep. And this was in the we had a little place in the back of the mess tent where you could just go and read. They had newspapers in there and stuff, and snacks. So you used to be able to go and sit in there.
Did you have an interpreter with you?
No. And you can't take pictures of the women, so I kind of pretended I was taking pictures of something else and just happened to get them in there. They really frown on that one too. This is the inside of the barn where the horses were. I took a picture of that just because of the way the stalls are. The stalls are just chain link. It's not like anything like we have here. This was the commander, who I don't really want to name.
You said that, yeah.
And this was just before a storm, one of the sandstorms. That's Aggie under all that stuff. It's like a frog. There's a sandstorm. Now, this picture here, they're sequence pictures. That's me standing in front of the mess tent. And then that's a few seconds later, the same exact picture as that one. And then this is after it all cleared.
Scary.
This is the telephone lines before Afghanistan, Iraq, and digital phones. We had phones set up, and it was kind of funny because you may have not got to the phone because you only had so much time to be there, and if you had to be somewhere else for a mission or whatever, you had to just leave your place and go back to where you were supposed to be going. Those lines went forever. This is the day we were making the outside of this tent. They were doing the memorial for Haynes. I couldn't stand being out there, so I just went in and helped Sergeant Smith again with the.
I can really see the camaraderie that you had,
Yeah,
that you mentioned.
And this I had. They wouldn't let us take anything home. We had a big bonfire to get rid of all the artifacts. And then guess what? About a week before we left the desert, they said the officers could bring home their artifacts. So, very little. I don't think anybody was able to sneak anything out of there. That was beautiful. It was made out of mahogany. I think it was an RPG. Nobody really knew what it was. Definitely was something that threw some kind of artillery. I wanted to bring that home so bad. Easter, I got a big bunny basket for Easter. And all that stuff was all goodies, and I think I got one piece of chocolate because you share everything.
That's right.
And there was a small bottle of whiskey hidden in there. So me and the Puerto Ricans drank that because I hung out with them. Aggie was a Panamanian, so naturally hung out with the Spanish guys.
Oh, okay.
So did I. This is where they were selling things. And see how bold they are? They're so bold. This was a kid. Climbed into the front of the truck, and I don't know whether he knew I was a female or not. I don't think he did, because they do that up until a certain age. Holding hands and kissing men and other things are okay until you're of marriage age. It's a well-respected part of their culture, which I think is kind of creepy, but...
Yeah, I agree.
And he was our NBC NCO, and he was getting ready to leave, so we had a little party under the, this is the maintenance tent, and we had a little party for him. And when we dropped off garbage, the Bedouins came and picked up whatever to see if they could use anything. So we were bringing we had a lot of water. So we were bringing a lot of water, boxes of water, and just leaving it for them. There's always one in every crowd. He came and he streaked through our tent. And this is us at Afabat, and that was when I snuck into the Quran classes during those trips into there. Accident. And they were all standing there. I mean, 100 miles an hour, all these people talking all at once. I had to get a shot of that. And no matter what war you're in, they always have miles to their hometowns and stuff.
Oh, okay.
This is one of the gold stores where they're everywhere there, and it's so cheap.
Nice.
You have to notice I love camels. I wanted to come back and raise them in Arizona. They're a 100% profit, you know. The whole animal is, the meat's great, the milk doesn't have any fat in it, it's all calcium. The hair is useful, the pads of the feet are useful, everything on that animal, it's like a bison, you can use it, every part of that animal. And that's how some people take a bath. Look at him, he fit himself into that. It's a dishpan, and he fit himself into it.
That's wild.
It's one of the nicer houses. I mean, I didn't see too much along there. Everything, because of the desert, looks grubby. You know, it doesn't look pretty. If you had trees or something around those things, that's what we use for target practice. That thing was so riddled with bullets. And this is where they set up where we could go to movies and stuff. They had movies and like an arcade, and it was kind of neat. And this is the bonfire the night before we left the desert. I didn't want to leave there.
Who's that?
That's the maintenance warrant officer. Oh, here's my mascot. I had that alligator with me everywhere I went. I still have him too. Alligator. And I drew the horse on the Jeep. That's what that picture was.
Nice.
Actually, all my equipment had horses drawn on them. My rifle butt had a horse engraved in it because, you know, you can dig those things out with a pen or a penknife. That was the last night we were there out in the desert. I just didn't want to leave there. Clyde. Look at, how did that go? A person was taking a picture of me, taking a picture of him. They're one-man animals, too. They're just an amazing animal. This picture here, the pipeline goes down here somewhere. It's in here. I'm not sure if that's it or if that's the horizon, but this is a picture of the pipeline, unless it might be that. I know that was what it was taken of, but I'm not sure where that was. And me and this guy snitched a Jeep and went to Riyadh. And that's where we're having lunch there. And I took a picture of this thing, was the centerpiece. Wait a minute. This is the pipeline back through here, but I think that's an extension. It was supposed to be an extension of that picture. This is in the airport when we had to set up in there before the planes. They were there for about 3 weeks before we had, you know, a plane set up for us. Pretty crappy place to put people, I'll tell you. And this is my friend Quentin that I was telling you about, that I've known ever since the Gulf War. I fell in love with this camel. This camel, the whole time I was there, I spent the whole time with that camel. And you know, his man, the man that owned him, he was taking pictures of people on the camel to send home and stuff. He actually talked to me. They don't talk to women. But he just loved the fact that I was stealing dates from everybody to feed his camel. And that one I named Clyde.
Those are great pictures.
And they're easy to get everywhere. I would have taken that camel home with me. And he'd make those noises, that noise. When he would see me, because I always wore those I don't know if they see color or not, but I thought that he saw me by those pants. So cool. But they do have pretty places now. This was a little park, and you know, all these are orphans. They had a little orphan place, so they're not, they aren't real, not everybody's mean in the Middle East. Some people are very nice, and they do have things set up for nice things, too. I would have taken him home. That's Aggie with Clyde. I wouldn't let anybody get on him for pictures from our unit because I thought it was nasty to use an animal that way. See? Look at the color of my hair now.
Oh, right.
It came back. After a couple of months, it came back mouse brown again. But they say that that doesn't happen. It does. It does happen.
Are you the only one it happened to?
Yep. I think I'm prone to it anyway, because look at how gray it is now. I just am not one of those that wastes time with dyeing and stuff. Just was looking out the window. See, they had everything set up when we came back. Everything was rah, 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 you know, and it just really does make you think of those guys coming back from Vietnam. And
Yeah.
I mean, even the planes, they had yellow ribbons on the planes, you know,
That you weren't forgotten.
yeah. And these here, this is back at Fort Dix. I was the only person in our unit that got promoted while we were over there.
Congratulations.
Came as a shock to me. See this uniform? If you want it, you can have it.
Okay.
And I still have the hat too, and I have everything that went with it. I also have the chemical suit that's still in the bag. It's not been opened, so actually it's still preserved. And I have the boots and all that stuff because evidently they aren't using that chemical stuff anymore. This was the Colts Neck Parade. Look at that. This was when we went to New York City and they had the ticker tape parade. And there's something interesting about this. Some of us didn't get desert boots. Our commander wouldn't let the ones that didn't have desert boots march. So what we had to do, there was 4 of us, we had to run along the back streets. We didn't even get to be in our own parade. And we ended up getting, of course, there's always people that don't believe in wars. So we ended up, the 4 of us, fighting with a bunch of people that were, I mean, fist fights with a bunch of people that were against the war in general. And we ended up getting back to where the buses were just in time to get on them. And you know, that was really stinky because that was our parade. But it was kind of interesting too. That didn't happen to everybody. I don't know who he was. He was just a police. Oh, I know what I was taking the picture of, the Clydesdales, and the cop got in the way. I tried to get in touch with, we had a mess sergeant over there that went through the DTs from being a, yeah, look at them. The DTs from, she was an alcoholic, so we went through that with her the first couple of weeks that we were at Saudi. Anyway, she got a couple of good pictures of I told you about the hole in the ground at one of those things, and several other pictures that I didn't have my camera with me. And recently I tried to get in touch with her only to find out that she passed away quite a few years ago.
Wow.
I wish I could find him. I just wish I could find him. These are a lot of the destruction that happened over there and blown up places. I have an interesting photograph of them fueling the airplane from an airplane above it.
Oh.
And to Savior was the patriotic missile silos.
Wow.
Scary, isn't it? When you look at those things, it's just so scary. And these things here, within minutes, they're rusted. There's the highway underneath again.
See?
We got to keep, I kept that in my pocket. These are beaties. There's one. It looks like a roach. Basically, it is a roach because there's a lot of THC in what they used to sell for cigarettes. And they actually stopped us from buying the beaties because you test positive for them. Well, they were good little cigarettes, though. I mean, I smoked at that time. And I love their money as horses in some of these things. You'll see the Arabian horse on, this is obsolete money now, though. This is from one of the, just because it had the writing, this is, I had bought a piece of jewelry. In fact, the receipt is behind it because I just wanted to show the their writing. And So that went with whatever, I think it was a little pair of gold earrings with a little ruby. And this is what we had to keep our ammunition in. Had one in your helmet, one in your pants, and one in your BDU jacket, in case you got blown up. They would be able to put you back together again, or put the pieces stick back together again. Isn't that gorgeous?
Oh, yes.
Here, and they still caught it.
Oh, interesting.
That might have had my address, you know, my name, and it's still got CID to come and visit with me. And it wasn't meant to, you know, throw a dime on somebody. What it was meant for was, come on, people, think of what you're doing. I'm no angel. The things that I had carried back home with me in a pocket, so I just kind of put in there. And this is from the camel's milk. Oh God, I love that stuff. It's so healthy and so good.
Better than cow's milk.
And goat's milk, better than goat's milk also.
Oh, okay.
This was a friend of mine was sending, he's a truck driver here at home from Maine, and he was sending me things that were enlightening that people were putting up on signs around the United States when he was driving around.
Oh, that was thoughtful.
Yeah, and this was at a truck stop, you know, a shirt that I think he bought that for himself. He sent me a lot of little odds and ends too from the truck stops. And of course, that's a lightning tomato, 78 divisions patches. Report. I think it's the same thing as they have, the same report they have now. And that's my combat patch. The only patch that has the sword pointing down. You'd figure, you know, you'd really figure.
It's a parachute, right?
Yep. Picture in the whole thing. Yeah, I had that enlarged. I wanted it actually bigger than that, but they said that if it went bigger than a 5x7 from that little negative, that you wouldn't get any real clarity at all.
Oh, okay.
But you can tell, you know it's me by the purple, the pink sunglass shades, because you're not supposed to wear those. You were supposed to wear what they, you know, issued to you, which were black, dark.